Are low interest rates impacting on your investment returns? It's time to rethink. Rethink Investing creates wealth for clients through the strategic purchase of positively geared, high cash flow commercial property. Industrial properties, retail assets, or office spaces can be a smart investment option that produces significant and long-term return on investment. Rethink your investment options and look to commercial property. Learn more at rethinkinvesting.com.au. Rethink Investing, Australia's #1 commercial buyers agency.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Hi, good everyone. How you going? Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. Smart Property Investment. Phil Tarrrant here, host. I've been doing this for a few years now, and it's nice to know that even though we are probably into our, I don't know how many hundreds of episodes we've done now, we're still resonating. It's even getting even more popular with our community of property investors right across Australia. And to give you some sense now, there's well over 100,000 people listening to this podcast every single month. We should get a real kick out of just some recent reviews coming through the podcast players. This one I'm looking at right now, the Apple iTunes. Great insights. Thanks for such frank and open advice on building wealth and the benefits of doing it through commercial property. Thank you. That's from Raquello, only recently. Another headline here, investor stories. Love the real world investor stories, especially ones that include inverted commas, average portfolios, not only in the mega portfolios with 10 or 15 to 20 properties. That's from Kuta9. Thanks, Kuta9, for writing in. And the guys get a real kick out of this, by the way, reading these reviews. There's another one here, Eye Opener. This is Lewis James Price is the handle. Thanks, Lewis. Thanks, guys. As the title says, you guys offer an eye open into the shark-infested waters. You provide an all-star to track forward toward and achieve goals to get their legends. And that sort of stuff we like. So please keep them coming. We do read them. They're really important to us. And it's just not me here behind the microphone talking. It's a big team of really capable people here who make me sound good and do all the heavy lifting with this particular podcast. So please get reviews coming. If you want to come on the show, we're always looking for guests, editor at smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. And to that point, you don't need to be a property bazillionaire with 50 properties. You could be starting out, and they're the stories we like, or those which are looking to scale their portfolio. So in this particular market, it's tough, it's challenging. There's lots going on. There's a lot of commentary on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au recently about whether you should sit out and wait for this market to run or get involved. Maybe outside of the scope of this particular chat today, because we have an investor in the studio, James Mitchell. He's recently purchased a principal place of residence with view to leverage it in time to invest in property, but also to have a better work-life balance. He's bought a place somewhere in Pittwater. James Mitchell, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Nice to be here.
Now, where do we start with this? So you've part of this hashtag COVID life. You've worked out, you've got a more flexible working environment now where you can do days in the office and days out of the office. And your days out of the office now, you've chosen to live on an island somewhere. Tell us about it.
Yeah, Scotland Island. Not everyone knows about it or where it is, and is an island on Pittwater. It's about 400 meters from Church Point or Bayview, quite close to Newport, and on the northern beaches there. So it's a really nice spot, actually, beautiful spot, and not unlike Dangar Island, which is on the Hawkesbury River, which is also like an island where people live on, but yeah, it's sort of been a bit quirky up until recently, because why would you live on an island? It just seems inconvenient, which is true. But also with COVID, as you said, that, I think it's always been like, well, if you can work from home, that would be a nice place to live. But now that's a reality. So I think there's more interest.
Yeah, it's a good point. So I think what COVID has taught corporate Australia is that activity-based working with your colleagues and peers in an environment, largely office, is absolutely critical for a whole bunch of different reasons, for not only business outcomes, but I think also for the betterment of people's mental health and connectivity. They reckon one of the biggest health concerns facing the Western world right now is loneliness, right? So everyone rushing back to be locked up inside their houses and getting Uber Eats probably lends itself to that. However, I think businesses are now realizing also that flexibility and work from home type environments doesn't necessarily mean less productivity. So you've capitalized on that, like a whole bunch of other Australians. You've just moved to an island in the Pittwater, whereas other people are sort of heading off to the hills or heading up to Byron Bay. Was it a big decision for you to make that call?
Yeah, definitely a big decision. And it's mine and my wife's first home as well. But again, it comes down to affordability, and our options were sort of limited. It was basically because we were, live in Sydney, and so we're either going to live up the Central Coast or Blue Mountains. When we were looking at the Central Coast, properties were around the 650 mark. You could still get a 3-bedder in somewhere like Woy Woy for about 650 on 500 squares of land, and potential to add value. They've rocketed right up. You get 3 bedrooms in Woy Woy now are like 750, 800. And so I can't see much value there. And then if we hadn't have bought Scotland Island, we would have gone to the Blue Mountains. Yeah. But I think it's important to caveat that as a principal place of residence and somewhere, we got young children. I got a son, he's 2.5, and a daughter who's 4 months. So we're looking for somewhere where there is a lifestyle element to it as well. And it will be a family home. We're quite old fashioned, I guess, in terms of, how we want to make the home our own and that sort of thing. And Scotland Island lends itself to that in a really nice way. It's, you're obviously on the water. There's a nice sense of community. It's safe, and it's a great place to raise a family, I think.
So this is a podcast for property investing. So we should really consider this particular investment. Now, this is nearly everyone will go through this where they'll, there's a 2-speed sort of economy for property investors. It's the home you live in, and then it's the properties that you invest in. Sometimes they blur into one another, and people actually use the strategy of buying a principal place of residence, doing it up, and then moving on and either renting that property out or selling it, and then just stepping up through that way. Now, buying up on Scotland Island, if you're doing this pre-COVID, you would probably say, well, it's a pretty unique spot and maybe not necessarily something which is going to be attractive to most. So, and we'll ask about property prices, but, post-COVID environment and flexibility, to your point, the attractiveness of these properties maybe should be going up in value, and there should be a good resale to it. So as an investment, are you concerned that should you ever want to get out of this particular property and move back to the mainlanders? I don't know if there's some derogatory terms that Scotland Island people call the mainlanders, but no doubt there is.
No, we just call them mainlanders. That's derogatory enough.
Mainlanders. Are you worried that you've overpaid for this property and markets may change and you might not be able to get out or get stuck with a property like this?
Not at all. We bought it under market value, and it was a favorable purchase. We purchased it off my wife's parents. They own a few places on the island, and we purchased it from them. So we're very fortunate to purchase it below market value. So I'm not worried about that. What I would be, concerned about, or something to think about, is it needs a lot of work, and we're going to be sort of developing on the parcel of land there and that sort of thing. So not overcapitalizing on it, but we're pretty much confident that we don't ever want to sell it. We want to keep it as a sort of family legacy place, and I want to pass it on to my children and hopefully their children after that. So, yeah.
So it's like a generational type of investment. Right. Now, so I guess the flexibility there at a point in time, if you move back to the mainland, you've got a holiday weekend, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. And, that's all part of the strategy, is it?
That's all part of the strategy, yeah. To have this place, which my wife's father built it with his own hands. He's an engineer. He bought the land in 1987. And I think it was a week before the stock market crash. And he thought, do I put my money into land or do I put it in the property market, into the share market? And he bought the land, and then the share market crashed a week later. But so, yeah, he built the house there. And I like that idea of legacy, and we purchased it from them, and we're going to do it up. It's been neglected a little bit. So, and creating something which lasts and has a bit of a story to it.
Yeah. And I want to chat to you about financing, because lenders might get a bit sort of jerky around sort of more bespoke assets. Let's go to break beforehand. Back in a moment.
Whether you're a seasoned property investor or about to buy your first property, finding the right investment property to buy in 2021 isn't easy. Why do it alone when you could partner with award-winning buyer's agent Paul Glossop? Over the last 10 years, Paul has helped hundreds of clients build multi-property portfolios. Paul's secret is finding off-market bargains that get snapped up before the general public even gets a sniff. Interested? Head to purepropertyinvestment.com today to schedule a strategy call with Paul Glossop.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show with Property Investor, principal place of residence investor with view to move into property investing. James Mitchell. Now, mortgages, securing a mortgage for Scotland Island, easy or hard?
It was challenging. It was definitely challenging. I had to jump through some hoops. So interestingly, if we take a step back, So we settled on the place at the end of January. We started the mortgage process probably around September. So January 2021, we settled end of January. But we started the mortgage process September, October 2020. And I was actually on a bushwalk with a friend of mine who is a mortgage broker, very experienced mortgage broker. He's been broking for about 30 years. His name's Ranjit Thambaraja from Acuity Funding. And we were going on a bushwalk through Barara, and this was last winter. And he said that you better apply for that. Because I said, I'm about a year out from my savings, And he said, well, your wife's pregnant. You better get the mortgage done sooner rather than later, because once your wife has the baby, she'll become a dependent, and then you'll have 2 other dependents. You'll have 3 dependents of 1 income. I said, oh, okay. I never thought about that way. So we got onto it and applied for the loan. And the bank came back and said, we wanted to do a 5% deposit. And the bank came back and said, there's no way that we're going to lend to this property on Scotland Island for anything less than 80% LVR. And we didn't have, the purchase price was $550,000, by the way. And we didn't have 100 grand lying around as a deposit. So I said, well, I guess that's that then. Better luck next time. And he said, no, leave it with me. He said, it was CBA was the lender. He said, let's get CBA to do a valuation on the property. So I said, all right. He goes, do you think it'll come in above that? I said, yeah, it'll be above that, but I'm not sure how much. This whole story around COVID and people moving up to Byron Bay and regional areas hadn't kicked off yet. So that wasn't really a factor in what we were doing. And so we were actually up in Thredbo, and we were on the chairlift, and he gave us a call, and he said, yep, the valuation's come in 850,000. And I said, oh, good. That's good news. He said, yeah, it is good news. I said, so now he said, well, that's just, one bit of good news. There's a few other things we need to do. And it all, piece by piece, very slowly came together. It was quite a process. And we even managed to get the stamp duty financed by CBA as well by increasing the purchase price. The vendor was obviously my wife's parents, so they increased it to 580 from 550. So therefore, no deposit down, no stamp duty. It was all financed by the lender.
And how much equity you reckon you've got in the property now based on that house?
Yeah, like 250,000.
Wow, sounds like you mentioned a favourable purchase, but this goes to the point. It's a favourable because you bought it off a family member.
Yeah, and also it was on the market for like almost a year before that. And I mean, it's funny, places there now are selling quite, the market's definitely picked up there. I've seen a bunch of places have gone on the market. And Mike Cannon-Brooks, the CEO of Atlassian, one of the founders of Atlassian, one of the richest men in Australia, just recently purchased the most expensive property ever sold on Scotland Island, $8 million.
Okay. Is it a nice place?
It's all right. It's a fixer-upper.
It's a fixer-upper. Imagine. So what's attractive is Scotland Island? Up on the hill looking over everything, or down on the water?
Our place?
No. What is deemed to be the blue chip?
The waterfront places. The waterfront. Yeah, right on the waterfront, because then you've got, and parcels of land there are pretty big. So we're on 1,200 square meters.
Okay.
But yeah, some of them are up to 2,000 or even bigger. Yeah, some of them are a lot bigger. And some people have, multiple plots, but definitely on the water, because you've got your jetty and you have your boat there. And again, like you're on the northern beaches, it's not like you're out in the middle of nowhere. You're very central. So yeah.
Yeah. Sounds okay. So, well, you talk about, so that's good buying, and it's because you talk about favorable purchase. And
yeah, we're
very
fortunate.
That's terminology that's used, favorable purchase. And you got to disclose it all. You got to do it properly with, that sort of stuff. But in some ways, for those of you out there who are thinking about how you can help transition your kids into investing in property or getting a foothold, rather than gifting them cash to go and buy something, you can actually give them, if you already own a house, you can sell your house to them for whatever you want to sell it to them. You can sell a house for half what it's actually worth. All it needs to be disclosed. It's got to be transparent and all this sort of stuff. And the banks will still, to your point, will fund it based on their valuation of it. They get to make a fair and impartial assessment of what it's worth. And therefore that's helping you get into the market. Now you've got, I don't know, what'd you say, 250 grand of equity in that property now, which is the equity being the difference between the value of the property, and you've got a bank val, so that's pretty good, versus the mortgage on it. That's quite a lot of money, mate. What are you going to do with that equity? We'll go to break beforehand. You can tell me about it when we come back. Stay with us.
Are low interest rates impacting on your investment returns? It's time to rethink. Rethink Investing creates wealth for clients through the strategic purchase of positively geared, high cash flow commercial property. Industrial properties, retail assets, or office spaces can be a smart investment option that produces significant and long-term return on investment. Rethink your investment options and look to commercial property. Learn more at rethinkinvesting.com.au. Rethink Investing, Australia's #1 commercial buyers agency.
Welcome back, everyone. Phil Tarrrant, host of the Smart Property Investment Show with James Mitchell, property investor with plenty of equity in his back pocket. Is it burning a hole in your wallet, James, or are you going to sit there and not look to spend it too quickly?
Well, basically, back at the envelope calculation. So we want to extend the place. So it's a timber 2, almost 3-bed sort of cottage, and we want to extend it so it'll be like a 4-bed, 2-bath with a study, and make it like a big family home. And we also want that it needs extensive landscaping because it's pretty much like a jungle over there. And we want to put a second dwelling, just like a 2-bed granny flat, down towards the front of the actual land that we have there. The house is to the rear of the block. We want to put a dwelling to the front of the block. But our back of the envelope calculation is that we don't want to spend more than the valuation. I'm still undecided whether we release the equity to sort of fund these projects and the value add, or this is a decision I'm more leaning towards, along with my wife, is to make it a 5-year plan. And during that time, we live there. The kids grow up there, and I'm actually interested in learning a lot of the sort of handyman stuff I need to do, in order to make some of these changes to the place, some of the DIY stuff. Obviously, with the big jobs, I'll get someone in, and the stuff which requires a specialist. But otherwise, I'm quite happy to sort of, do a bit of trial and error and that sort of thing, purely because we have that flexibility with the equity already in the place. And also, it's because of the location. It's difficult to get people over there, Tomorrow, I've got a guy coming around to put gutter guards on because it's tank water. And so we need some new gutter guards to make sure that, the water system works out properly. And that's one of the drawbacks, I guess, of living on an island. You've got to make sure the guy's got parking on the mainland, and then you've got to get the water taxi over and all that sort of stuff.
Sounds a lot more expensive as well.
Yeah, much more expensive. Yeah, people will hike up their fees, and they don't really want to do work on there. So I think being self-sufficient and learning to be self-sufficient is something which I'm going to throw myself into as we grow into the community there.
That's cool. And sort of longer term, so that's more of a passion project.
Passion project.
So building a compound for the family. So you're looking to have 2 different dwellings on the property. Is that the idea?
That's right.
Is that so you can have guests over? Is that for Airbnb or?
We're thinking Airbnb. It sort of lends itself to that type of environment. It could also, and it's flexible as well. It could be used as a long-term rental, and it could also be used at Airbnb. Whatever brings in the best return, I guess. Yeah, but we wouldn't be subdividing the land in any way. It would purely just be down the front.
Imagine that'd be pretty hard to do subdivisions on Scotland Island.
Yeah, I think it can be done, but yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. So you've got to have all your eggs in that basket for some period of time. Are you looking, for property investment? Do you have a longer term plan or play for creating wealth through property, or are you going to put your heart and soul into Scotland Island?
For the next 5 years, I think we'll put our heart and soul into Scotland Island, just because it is a passion project and we want to really bring it to life and have it for the family. But then I think if that goes to plan, I think it'd be a good time to reassess and look at where we're at. I'll be almost 40, which is probably a good time to figure out which way we want to go. But definitely investing in property and growing wealth through property is something which obviously has, piqued my interest, over the years. And I think I want to get this project underway first, and then I'd go that route. But if I do, I don't think I'd use a buyer's agent. No. You
think you do it yourself?
Do it myself. And again, I think it would have to be something along the lines of a passion project. It's just the way I'm wired. It would have to be something a bit adventurous and like a bit, maybe some risk to it, or, you know what I mean? Like Scotland Islands, it's not for everyone. Some people would be like, that sounds like a nightmare. But I don't know. It can't just be numbers to me. There's got to be something even about the property. I'd buy a property that looks a certain way or that has a certain feel. I probably, I just probably wouldn't go off pure investment metrics. I'd even probably buy some land somewhere and build something.
You sound like the sort of guy that makes mistakes in property. The handful of people who actually do really well versus those who who end up only having one or two properties because they buy the wrong stuff. But I think there can be an intersection, to be fair, between
but also
passion versus investment outcomes, right?
Because I mean, I'm not, and this is another thing which I find interesting with probably maybe some people in property investment space, is that I like, a lot of people talk about growing a portfolio so that they can have passive income and then they can retire at a certain age. Like, I love what I do for a living. I write stories and I create content and that sort of stuff. So I'm like, I'd quite happily work into my later years if I'm able to. So that impetus to like create some sort of passive wealth so that I can, play golf or something like that, I don't know, go fishing, doesn't really interest me. So the drive to secure a passive income is not really there. So I'm quite happy to throw my money and my time into passion projects and make those mistakes. Yeah, probably with a bit less fear.
Yeah. Well, the best way to learn is by doing. And as long as you win more than you lose, you're typically ahead of the game. And I know most property investors are probably the same way. Like, not everyone has a glowing record as property investors. Everyone, including myself. There's those that you don't win, but you might not necessarily like the lesson, but the lesson is the valuable one, right?
You always get a good story out of it.
You always get a good story out of it. But that's cool. So that's an interesting philosophy you have there, James. And it's good, it's part of the Smart Property Investment Show. Is the reason why we do investor stories, is to share these different perceptions and different views towards property and property investment. We're recording this on the eve of the budget, James.
That's right.
You think there's anything curly in there for homeowners or property investors? Do you keep track of this sort of stuff? Is there something in your warehouse?
Yeah, I think there's a lot in there for first home buyers. So on that basis, you wouldn't have got any grant as a first home buyer? I didn't get a grant, no.
No,
didn't get any grant.
But it's not new or anything.
No, and also interestingly, and I think we should include this. If anyone listening is in a situation where their parents have a investment property which they can sell to them under value and that get the equity, like similar situation that we have in a favorable sale, do be aware that the stamp duty and any associated costs are taken on an independent valuation of that property.
Absolutely.
Not on the sale price. So we thought, great, pay less stamp duty too. But no, the stamp duty was based on the 850. And because we had to do an independent valuation as well. Because the independent val came in at 850, that was over the threshold for being free of stamp duty. So therefore we had to pay the stamp duty. And I think that may also hit the vendor as well. Just, by selling it cheaper, you don't necessarily pay less capital gains tax. So that's it. I think anything like this, it's really good to speak to an accountant before you go ahead with it, because there's tax implications.
Yeah, and that's well said, James, and I highly agree with you. And to the sort of start of the podcast, it's okay, like, to do favourable sales, and that is quite common, but it's got to be absolutely transparent. You can't hide anything under the covers. You've got to do it by the book, because, in every property transaction, both the seller and the buyer, there will be a tax consequence of some sort. And guess what? The government, the New South Wales government, if you're buying New South Wales, are going to want their bit of that transaction. So you're best off being absolutely transparent across every single area. And a good accountant will look at how he can help or she can help minimize those outcomes. But play by the rules and play by the book. Otherwise, it will come back and bite you at a point in time when you want to sell that property. These things, data matching, all this sort of stuff is so good these days that if you think you're going to get away with being a bit dubious in these transactions, you will get found out. So play by the books would be my recommendation.
And also just quickly, things which you wouldn't have even thought of during the mortgage process, like elder abuse, for example. The broker said, we need to make sure that, both parties are represented fairly and that, this is
and not getting bullied into it.
Not getting bullied. No, legit. Not getting bullied into it, because the banks have got to be conscious of that as well. That they're not facilitating that sort of behavior. So that wasn't even something I thought about.
So you have had to get a letter from the vendors, i.e. your wife's parents, saying we are freely going into this and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's complicated. But, there's reasons why there's checks and balances like this, because in the past, this sort of stuff has happened.
Of course.
And it happens a lot. I remember I went to the bank the other day. It's really funny, just to get some cash out for something. And they asked me what it was for, and I said, "I just need some cash for something." It was actually to pay for. It was actually paid for it to a party, like a party, right? At a restaurant. And I wanted to pay them with cash. And they said, "Is anyone coercing you to take this money out?" And I went,
"Wow,
well, no, why do you ask? And say, well, we have to ask because we need to, so I had to actually say to them, no one's coercing me to take this money out. So you're talking about exactly the same thing there, that, no one's bullying
say the voice in my head's telling me to do it.
Yes, he's an evil guy. He's sort of about 6'3" and he's really big and works in property, but
That's right.
Anyway, we digress. James, that's really informative, mate. Some really good takeaways there. Thank you. And when you go down this pathway of building this out, because no doubt, you're trying to build some sort of capital so you can either move back to the mainland as mainland investors and buy your principal place of residence there. And this, it sounds like it's going to be an ongoing sort of holiday home or some sort of asset that you can generate income from through Airbnb. So when you go down that pathway, mate, come back and check in with us. But I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
Nice one. That's James Mitchell, property investor. We'll write up some stories on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au around this as well. So go and check it out. Plenty of information there if you want to be connected with what's happening with property so you can make more informed investing decisions every single day. We're there with all the info. There's heaps of data as well on pretty much every single suburb in Australia and all the information you need to know across suburbs with suburb reports and special deep dives. Go and check it all out, smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Social media, Smart Property HQ is where you will find us. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
What would your life be like without education? So They Can knows that education is key to breaking the poverty cycle. Yet sub-Saharan Africa has the highest rates of education exclusion in the world. COVID-19 has only exacerbated that, with estimates indicating that girls in particular are 16% less likely to return to school. Join So They Can on their mission to educate and empower students in East Africa to change their future by sponsoring a student, extending your family circle, or joining an education collective to sponsor a school today. Visit sotheycan.org/sponsor to find out more.